Good evening. At this time, I'd like to call to order the Special Planning Commission meeting of July 29th, 2019. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation.
Will the secretary please call the roll?
Commissioner Buss?
Present.
Commissioner Cohan?
Here.
Commissioner Lanson?
Here.
Commissioner Newman?
Here.
Chair McMahon?
Here. Okay, item number 4, written comments. Are there any written comments, announcements, or continuances at this time?
Chair, there's one email that was received late this afternoon in regards to item 7A on the agenda. It's on there. Staff will address it briefly during the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Item number 5 is public comments. Now is the time for public comment. At this time, any person may address the commission regarding a city planning matter that is not on this evening's agenda. Should the commission wish to discuss an issue raised by a member of the public, the issue will be referred to staff for scheduling on a future agenda. Anyone who would like to speak under public comments must complete a speaker card and file it with the recording secretary before the public comments portion of the agenda is called. The speaker's remarks should be addressed to the commission as a whole and not to an individual commissioner or staff member. Unless otherwise provided by the commission, speakers are limited to 5 minutes. The monitor in front of you will show you the remaining time you have, but I do not believe we have any public comments. Okay. Item number 6, the consent calendar with the minutes of July 8th, 2019. Do any of my fellow commissioners have any comments, or is there a motion to approve the minutes? Commissioner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move that we approve the minutes.
Can you push the button? Oh.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay. Item number 7, public hearings. Will the clerk please open the public hearing?
Hearing having been advertised as required by law is hereby open to consider agenda item 7A, case number SUP 2019-70537, to approve a special use permit to allow an electronic waste facility to occupy approximately 23,418 square feet of an existing approximate 64,880 square foot 2-story multi-tenant industrial building on a 3.31 acre parcel located within the boundaries of the Rancho Conejo Industrial Park Specific Plan, SB 15, and is zoned M1 Industrial Park. Located at 2001 Anchor Court B, the applicant is PC Recycling.
Presenting on behalf of staff is Associate Planner Don Nielsen.
Chair, if I may, before Don begins his presentation, I just wanted to make sure everyone had an opportunity to meet him. This is actually his first item before this commission. Don is also one of the new members of the planning staff that we hired away from another local city, and we're very happy to have Don here on board. He's already proven himself in many different ways. Oddly enough, he had the opportunity to sit for an item for city council before he actually came to planning commission, which is rare and unusual. And with that, I'll turn it over to Don, who will help us through this item.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Parker, Chair, and members of the Planning Commission and members of the public. As stated previously, the request is to allow an electronic waste facility to occupy approximately 24,000 square feet of an existing approximately 65,000 square foot multi-tenant industrial building. The project site is located within the Rancho Conejo industrial area of the city, and it is located specifically at the corner of Anchor Court and Rancho Conejo Boulevard. The surrounding areas are all primarily industrial uses or uses that are allowed within the M1 zone, and the closest residential area is to the northeast of the site, as you can see on this image. The Planning Commission review is required for this particular item since the municipal code requires that a use permit for a recycling center be required within the M1 zone. Administrative, I'm sorry, my thought process went out the window. The Thousand Oaks Municipal Code does not provide for any administrative permit path forward for this particular use. A little bit of background on the project site. Back in 1979, the Ventura County approved a development permit for a 54,000 square foot multi-tenant building, which is actually the subject building. Then fast forwarding to 1991, the city of Thousand Oaks actually approved it was a Rancho Conejo Industrial Park annexation. And then a year later, the city council approved it was the adoption of the specific plan 15, which is the Rancho Conejo Industrial Park specific plan. And then in 2014, the Planning Commission actually approved it was another use permit in the same building for an indoor sports facility. And that sports facility is actually it's an adjacent tenant to the proposed use. Here we have some of the site locations for the building. It's this is the southeast corner of the site. Here we have, this is the middle portion of the building. PC Recycling is proposed to occupy the central portion of the said building. And here we have, this is the southwest corner of the site as well. This particular image, this actually shows, this is the rear portion of the site, and it's the existing rear parking area and access driveway, and this driveway does connect directly onto Rancho Conejo Boulevard. The proposed project for the e-waste facility primarily focuses on household electronics. However, they do accept electronics from the commercial sector as well as the general public. An example of this would be if a hotel is going through and doing a remodel, all the electronic devices contained within that hotel could then be sent to this particular facility. Or if you were to go through and replace all of your electronic devices in your house, you can then drop off the old obsolete devices at this particular facility as well. After PC Recycling receives those materials, they dismantle the components down to their base, down to the base materials, and then package all of those materials up for shipping to other facilities that are off-site. So no actual breakdown or hard manufacturing or processing actually occurs on the site. Additionally, all the employees, they do receive monthly trainings. An example of this would be proper handling and packaging of the materials. Also, all of these trainings that the employees receive are governed by other regulatory agencies at the state and the federal levels. The facility also averages approximately 4 truck trips each day, either going to collect materials or materials being sent to the actual facility. And the applicant did indicate they receive about 2 public drop-offs each day. This facility would be open to the general public, not just Thousand Oaks residents. Based upon those numbers, the expected and also any projected vehicle trips, they do not exceed any established thresholds that the city has. Here we can also see these are the applicant's proposed hours of operations. The city, we are not controlling these particular hours of operations in order to allow the applicant the flexibility of opening either earlier or later. However, the operation is still controlled by other facets of the municipal code. The proposed use is consistent with the industrial land use designation as contained in the general plan, and it does meet one specific general plan goal, as well as policies that are targeted for industrial, as well as the design and environmental review policies. Staff does have the full text of this, the goal and the policies, if the Planning Commission does wish to review those. The proposed project, as stated previously, is also located within the Rancho Conejo Industrial Park specific plan. That specific land does require any recycling facility to be approved through the use permit process. So therefore, this project is compliant with the specific plan. Additionally, the project is located within the M1 zone. The existing building, so the existing site conditions, all conform to the applicable zoning requirements. Additionally, the proposed use will not alter any of the exterior of the building. It will not add any new square footage to the building, and it will not alter the site. Based upon that, staff did not conduct a development standards review. And also because this is strictly for a use permit only, since there is no exterior construction involved. However, staff did conduct a parking analysis for the site in order to ensure that there was enough parking located on site for all uses. And we can come back to this particular slide if the commission wishes, but just to point out, all existing uses on the site only require approximately 100 parking spaces, whereas the site does provide for 146 parking spaces. So there is still ample parking with the existing uses there. Special use permits, for the city, they are intended to evaluate business operations and uses that may or may not be appropriate for given locations. And this is really the evaluation for the proximity to sensitive use receptors. And we'll get into what those are in just a moment. Also, the conditions in those cases, they're imposed on the special use permit, and they're very site specific. And so city staff does tailor those conditions for what's being proposed. The proposed use is not located within 400 feet of any of the identified sensitive uses as defined by the municipal code. As I'd mentioned earlier, the closest sensitive use are a single-family residential, and they are approximately 700 feet to the northeast. This particular project is categorically exempt from CEQA pursuant to Section 15308, since this action is taken by the city in order to protect the environment. No exceptions apply to defeat the exemption. Of note, as Mr. Kelvin had stated previously, staff did receive a public communication from the project coordinator objecting to a particular condition. Staff would not support the removal or alteration of this condition. So in conclusion, the proposed use is consistent with the general plan, the Rancho Conejo specific plan, as well as the municipal code. It complies with all the applicable laws, regulations, and policies. It will not be detrimental to the public health, safety, or general welfare. The project is categorically exempt from CEQA, and the project will be compatible with the surrounding land uses, since this is an industrial use located within an industrially designated area of the city that does contain other industrial uses. Therefore, staff does recommend that the Planning Commission adopt the resolution approving the use permit based upon the findings and subject to the conditions as worded. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of staff? Do you want to start?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Mr. Nielsen, for your report. First, regarding the parking and possibly outdoor storage, we got this additional note this evening. In your presentation and in the staff report, which was very helpful, thank you, there's Table 1 on page 5 of the staff report gives the required parking as 40 spaces. The letter we received just before the meeting states the lease grants the applicant the use of 55 parking spaces. So are those two numbers referring to different things, or how many parking spaces are we talking about here?
So staff's analysis, parking analysis is based upon what's located on site. We do not control any of the lease agreements, and so that is a private contract between the applicant and the property owner.
Okay, I'll follow up with the applicant as well, but is it, you're saying that of the 55 referenced in the applicant's letter, staff survey found only 40 of those on site. Is that correct?
If I may, if you don't mind, if I may jump in here a little bit. The analysis conducted by staff is just a minimum requirement per the code. In the table prepared by Mr. Nielsen for this, he indicated that there's a surplus of parking on site. So he was correct in stating that the landlord has the ability to assign a higher number of spaces to any particular tenant, particularly when they're in surplus.
Okay, so it's possible that all 55 spaces would be on site.
That is correct.
Great. Thank you for that.
And just a clarification, so looking at Table 1, we do have it's the required parking for Suite B. The industrial use requires it's the 40, but then there's the incidental offices, which require 14.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry.
that's
yes.
54.
Yeah,
Then we
yeah,
go
yeah.
over the
I'm
provided
sorry.
parking. We have
I
the
missed that.
55.
So that's 54, 55. We're certainly in the ballpark.
That is correct.
Yeah.
So under the provided parking, they are provided for 55 parking spaces, which is, and the proposed use only triggers 54 parking spaces.
My apologies. I missed the office use piece of that. The other is just clarification on the exemption from the environmental review, because hazardous wastes, e-wastes, are covered by the State Department of Toxic Substances Control. If I'm understanding correctly, that department or that agency classifies waste into two groups, universal wastes and hazardous wastes. And my question is, if we are recognizing that e-wastes can contain toxic materials, why are we putting them in the universal waste bucket and not in the hazardous waste bucket?
So back in 2003, the state adopted the California Electronic Waste Recycling Act, which is SB 20. And then in 2004, the state also adopted SB 15. So those two bills combined allow the Department of Toxic Substance Control to update the regulations in order to classify electronic waste as universal waste. So then in 2009, the DTSC updated the regulations to have that, to do the clarification of updating or where electronic waste is universal waste, but there's a caveat to it where the state actually put in additional regulations onto that. So you have universal waste, but any handlers that of electronic materials, they actually have additional regulatory actions that they have to abide by. So even though it's kind of a hazardous waste light, and it's kind of in that gray area between universal waste and hazardous waste. And the reason behind that is that because a majority of the electronic waste is not composed of hazardous materials. Electronic waste does contain trace amounts of those materials, specifically like lead, cadmium, and mercury. And all of those materials, so any of the hazardous materials, they're under strict packaging guidelines that are then sent to an offsite facility. And based upon all of the state regulations, so SB 20 and SB 50, there's enough of the regulations that the project can be exempt due to the reliance on the state laws. Additionally, there are federal regulations that do govern the disposal of those particular materials as well.
Okay. So it's a semantic thing then.
Exactly.
Not a legal distinction.
Yeah, and staff did contact CalRecycle and the DTSC for their confirmation of the state laws and the processing and handling of these materials. So we do have that confirmation from those two agencies.
Very good. Thank
Chair,
you.
Chair, if I may, Mr. Newman, you have a great point about this. We don't usually use Class 8 as far as an exemption. And Mr. Nielsen is correct. There's actually a regulations, California Code of Regulations that actually have new definitions, and they define these uses that he's going to have for this location as the universal waste, as Mr. Nielsen said. So it does meet that exemption, and because you have all these regulations by the state and federal government, we're able to use that exemption.
Thank you, Mr. Heer. I do have one other question.
Okay.
Have you heard from any members of the public, pro or con, about this application?
No.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any, Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Nielsen. That was a great report, and welcome to the process. Thank you for going through the process with us. Just a quick question. That was actually my first was about the public, but the second, I kind of want to get a little more definition on this one item that we have the email on. Did the staff make a determination as to whether these containers would be deemed storage under the terms of this provision?
Yeah, so the identified containers in the email would be considered outdoor storage per the municipal code's definition. As contained within the applicant's submitted materials, it was indicated that there would be no outdoor storage of any kind, and all operations would be contained within the interior. It's stated that in the applicant's narrative, which is attachment number 5, and if there is any proposed outdoor storage, it is typically seen on the actual site plan, and the submitted site plan did not contain any locational criteria for outdoor storage. Hence the reasoning behind this condition number 10. The applicant has spoken with staff about potentially continuing this discussion on an internal basis after the particular hearing, since the condition does allow for the community development director to potentially approve some form of storage, but that decision can happen outside of this approval.
Okay, and second question is, to the extent this was approved and they needed 2 parking spaces, would that then create the problem that there would be deficient parking?
That is correct. So right now, the parking analysis that staff conducted is based upon the uses that are existing at the site. However, if a new use were to come in that was more parking intensive, that could potentially trigger an issue with the total provided parking on site. Given that staff was unaware of the desire to have outdoor storage, we were not able to conduct a proper analysis with that in mind. So we cannot actually speak to the provision of outdoor storage at this time.
I guess my only follow-up question, maybe somewhat rhetorical, is this something we should continue to allow this conversation to take place, or is this something we...
If I may, for this particular item, I don't think a continuance would be warranted, as I think there's enough information presented to make a decision on the item. As with any case, the opportunity for a modification exists per our municipal code, whether it's in a condition approval or not. So in this instance, being how we noticed the hearing to the neighbors and it was presented and evaluated by staff, I think it would be appropriate to leave the condition as is. But as I mentioned, the municipal code does allow for provisions for modification.
Understood. I have no other questions. Thank you.
So I just want to be clear that if this was approved as is tonight, the applicant can go to you, to the staff administratively, and ask for this storage facility, and it wouldn't come back. It would just be a decision on your part.
Well, let me jump in really quick because, again, this is something we've just been looking at the last couple of hours. So the difficulty we have is what's going to be the process for any change. As staff has been stating today, and Mr. Parker as well, one of the challenges we have is the condition that we wrote was based upon the information we had at the time. And so the change is something that could create a need to evaluate not just the site plan, but to understand the owner of the whole complex as to parking issues that they might have or not have. At this point, just by looking at a 30,000-foot view of it, it looks like there might be enough parking, but you have to do that analysis, and you have to make sure there are no other leases that might be impacted by a loss of parking, because this is going to take away. If you look at Table 5, as Mr. Newman mentioned, there's a 54 parking spaces required for this location. So if you subtract 12 or a dozen, whatever it's going to be, 10 or a dozen, then you might be looking at a loss of that. And then how do you gain that back through the other spots? Certainly possible. So then you look at the mechanism of what that would take, and it might take a minor modification, for example. And when you look at a minor modification, there might be a notice. There might be someone who's not upset about that because now there are bins outside, and so that might be an administrative hearing. It might go. There could be other situations that could happen. So I think you might hear from applicant. They were to ask for a request. I won't speak for them, but I assume they're going to ask for a request, as they did in the email, to change that condition. That'll be before you tonight. But right now, staff's position is that we're going to keep the condition as written right now. Applicant can make his request, and you can hear that and make your decisions based on that request and the information that we can provide you.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions, Commissioner?
Yes, I have a question regarding the loading dock in the back. Is that currently being used for the facility, and can that be a staging area for the storage bins?
So the current suite is actually vacant, and so that it isn't being used in terms of actual use for any potential storage areas. That would be something that we'd actually have to take into evaluation, considering its any visibility location of those particular materials. in terms of actual use during the operations eventual operations of the facility, we will have to defer to the applicant on intended vision for that loading dock area.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner? Anybody? A commissioner?
I just want to confirm, so we've received no comment from the other tenant in the property?
That is correct. So staff did not receive any phone calls, communications, or public counter visits from any tenants, residents, or adjacent property owners.
Okay, that works for me. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we will now ask for the applicant and the applicant's representative to come and speak. Can you please come to the podium and state your name and city of residence for the record? And you have 15 minutes.
I'm with Jackson Titus Law Firm, and I'm here representing the applicant. And the first thing I'd like to say is to thank the commission and the staff for basically having the special meeting tonight to deal with this issue. My client had been notified that his lease in his former location has been terminated, and this is a service that is an asset to this community. I've been told that California's purchase 125 million new electronic devices every year. And what that means is they probably get rid of close to 125 million electrical devices every year. And the applicant here is the only recycler, dismantler between Los Angeles and San Francisco on the 101 corridor. So he is providing what is a unique environmental service because the state says, we don't want these things going to the landfill. They would go to the landfill if we didn't have facilities like his to dismantle them, put them into basically plastics, metals, and then get rid of the hazardous waste in an appropriate facility. So that's what he does. He does basically dismantling. He doesn't refine anything. He's not changing any of the hazardous waste into something else. It's basically breaking up these products into various parts. It was indicated that we had sent a memo or an email that I guess you got there today, and we're quite willing to work with staff on resolving the issue of the containers. 2 containers come each week with electric waste in. That electric waste is then taken out of those on a daily basis, dismantled, and then there are 2 bins in which plastics go into one bin and metals go into the other bin. These will be located in the back part of the building and nearest possible to the applicant's lease space. And in that back part, the adjoining property is at a different pad level, a higher pad level, and it's heavily landscaped. So this is in reality a isolated and hidden area. We are quite willing to work with staff and give them a new site plan on that aspect and work on ways we can further screen, if there is an issue, those facilities. But the applicant is only in business because he processes thousands, tens of thousands of electrical devices on a monthly basis. That's the only way you can make money in this. You can't recycle 10 TVs, 50 TVs, 100 TVs, and make any money. So it is in a bulk. He has bulk deliveries, and he will have bulk takeaways of the metals and plastic. And that's just part of the business. And he has been in the business for 10 years. He is reviewed by various state agencies as well as a organization that does regular audits. They come, surprise visits. They aren't announced. They come and knock on the door, and here we are to see how you're handling everything. And they have a lot of regulations. This is not an unregulated business. This is a heavily regulated business. And he has operated 10 years with no violations, with a perfect clean record. So he is doing a good job at what he's doing, and it's a job that's needed. We all have electrical devices in all our homes, and frankly, those electrical devices, yeah, they may have hazardous waste in them, but they're in your house. They're in your garage. And the issue in this state is how do we properly recycle those and take care of that waste? And it's interesting because in the last couple of months, the countries in Southeast Asia have refused to accept electrical devices, electrical waste from the United States. So we have to deal with the problem here. And this is just one of the providers of that service is becoming more and more important. And with that, I can respond to any questions or...
Do we have any questions, Commissioner?
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Sellers, the business about the outdoor storage is substantially different than the applicant's narrative that was submitted in the notice that went out to the public. That was 5 days ago, and we just got word about this 5 minutes before the meeting. Why the big change at the last minute?
Well, personally, I didn't see the conditions until I got back from vacation and looked at them today. I then sent it to my client, who then raised this issue. Says, yeah, we've got these bins, delivery bins, and sort of like a trash bin for, I mean, businesses have trash bins in the back. Is that storage? The issue is we do have some large bins and containers, and we have to deal with how can we hide those. How can we make sure there's no issue with the neighbors? And the neighbors are aware of his use. So they haven't expressed any opposition so far.
I'm sorry, the neighbors are aware that the applicant intends to have outdoor...
he has notified the neighbors, and the landlord is notifying, it's a PC recycling's coming into this middle space.
Okay, so you're saying it's not new that others are aware that the applicant intends to have outdoor storage? This is something that's been known?
They never expressed any concern about it, so we didn't go into details with where these bins will be.
I'm not questioning whether they're in favor or not. My question is why it's news to us, if this is something that has been known for some time.
First of all,
applicant.
Excuse me, would you please state your name and city of residence?
I'm sorry. I'm Fulton Connor. My residence is in Oak Park. Business location is in Newbury Park. The reason the confusion here, and I apologize, is we don't store anything outside. These things come and go on a rotational basis. So when I saw the word storage on the document, which I just saw today, I did raise a question for clarification on it. There was no deceit on our part because we don't leave anything out there. That's not the intent of what we're doing. It's just bringing this material in large volumes so we can process it and get it out in large volumes. There's nothing left out. Nobody sees anything except for the container itself. And unless you're very observant, you would see that there are different numbers on the containers on a very weekly basis. To the casual observer, they may look the same being there all the time, but no, that's how we're bringing material in and out.
Okay, so just again, so I understand the nature of what's being stored,
yeah,
if you will.
It's the storage thing, yes.
Right. They are, so containers are being brought in from the outside, offloaded from a truck. Container sits there in the parking lot.
So
Staff takes pieces from that container.
It's in one movement, if you will. The container's open, the material's taken out, brought inside, and then it's dismantled. Okay. The containers, so originate from the landfill. So all the material is not allowed to be buried in the landfill. It's diverted into the container, at which point is sent to us to be completely dismantled, and we rotate those containers in and out on their behalf.
Okay. And then following up on what Mr. Sellers was saying about notification of neighbors and landlord.
I personally spoke to all the neighbors before we even leased the space because I wanted to make sure that we didn't have a problem with the type of activity that we did. So this was an issue that I'd done as I spoke to various landlords and what have you. So they're well aware of what we're doing there.
Were landlords and neighbors specifically asked, and were they specifically okay about the outside storage of container
I had to be
units?
clear with everybody because I look, with what I do, I can't have any surprises.
Sure.
So yes, I discussed truck traffic, potential in and out, the containers that we have coming in and out. And additionally, I'd also like to address the parking because I only have 20 employees. And we made sure that we were allotted enough spaces specifically for this reason.
Right. So per Mr. Sellers' email it looks like you're talking about maybe 12 additional spots.
It wouldn't be in addition
containers.
to, it would be included with our lease. I'm not asking for more spaces.
Not
than what's in-
additional spaces,
Yeah,
but
Right, but it's included with what we're,
12 spots on top of the 20 employees,
in
give or
20
take,
employees. So potentially I'm using 32 spots
out
by
of an allotment of
55.
55.
That's correct.
Right, okay. Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
There's nothing further.
Do we have any other questions,
Yeah.
Commissioner?
Okay, just a couple quick questions. So the storage containers come from a landfill, they've got the stuff, you offload it, and then it's separated, and then it goes back into the containers, and where do they go from there? I'm just trying to follow the process for how this recycling works.
So when the material's offloaded, then we separate and break it down to its most basic products.
Yeah.
I'm essentially in the commodity business.
Yeah,
Steel, copper, aluminum, gold, plastic. That's
Okay,
what
so
I'm
you just
all
sell
about.
it out, and it's all pre-contracted, you have it?
It's all
specific price?
pre-contracted, and we ship all over the world.
Okay. That's what I was
So,
curious
but
about.
remember with me, it's about volume. I have to fill a container, which is, 40,000 pounds. So this is stuff that we're shipping out on a daily basis.
Okay, that's I was curious. So these trailers come in 2 at a time, and they stay
They
there
come
for a
in,
week
we
or
empty
daily?
them, they leave empty. Those particular containers leave empty.
Those leave empty, and you get other
We
ones.
package the stuff, the material in-house that we ship out to various countries around over the globe.
Oh, okay.
So
Copy that.
that's what we're doing in-house.
Okay, perfect. And then I had one more question as far as materials. Do you have batteries, other flammable?
We do.
explosive
So,
materials?
and all that stuff is handled. So we've got a vendor that takes lead alkaline batteries. I don't like to take them in, but we do take them because of, electronic toothbrushes. You'd be surprised at what
that's why
batteries
I'm
are
asking.
these days.
And that stuff won't be stored in those outside containers. That would
No,
all stay in the-
None of the, and again, I want to get away from storage outside. We're not storing anything outside. Those containers are strictly for offload. to move
Offload
into
only,
the
so nothing gets
facility.
loaded back into them.
There's nothing loaded back into those containers.
Copy that. Okay.
They
I'm
leave
glad you
empty.
explained that for the third time
Yes.
so that I could follow it. Thank you.
I'm happy to explain it lots.
All right, perfect. All right.
thank you.
That answers my question. Thank you very much.
Commissioner?
Hi, Mr. Sellers. Quick question. In terms of the containers, how big are they?
8 by 25, 8 by 25, and the other containers, I think we mentioned it today, are 8 by
8 by 20 and 8 by
8 by 20.
25.
So essentially the size of a parking space.
Essentially the size of a parking space. That's correct.
And I'm assuming are they locked in any way? Are they contained in some way so people can't just all of a sudden come up and take anything?
Good luck trying to get one of those doors open. We usually have to use a forklift to open them.
So is there any possible way as part of the premises that these containers could be brought in the facility?
I reasonably could not tell you that I could load them indoor or move them indoors.
Is there a loading dock as part of the property?
We have loading docks, yes.
And would
and
there
a
be a way
ramp.
to actually have that container brought in as part of the business and again have it be in the building as opposed to outside?
I could not move it inside. I don't think it would actually even clear the dock.
When is the container delivered, just out of curiosity, usually?
It's usually based on the trucking company that I work with. I call them, let them know that they're ready, they've been cleaned out and they're ready to be picked up, and it usually happens within a 2 or 3 day period of that phone call. It happens on every Tuesday it doesn't work that way.
So how long would a container be on site then for a certain period of time?
It's usually never there for more than 4 days.
Okay. All right. Nothing further.
And just let me add that the loading dock, he has other trucks, smaller trucks come in with electrical waste that back up and then unload into the facility. So
Well, that's good to know. That's good. Anybody else? Commissioner?
Just one quick follow-up, Mr. Fulton. My understanding and from previous visits to your existing facility in Newbury Park, there currently are a large number of bins outdoors, correct?
There's
Smaller
currently
bins.
a large, I'm sorry, there's what?
There are currently smaller bins that are outdoors at the current facility, correct?
Well, it's the same containers we're discussing today. The difference between my current facility and our new facility is we have an outdoor area that we're doing dismantling outdoor. It is covered, but it's still outdoor dismantling. Okay,
That's what I'm referring to, yes.
We're moving all those operations indoors. So none of that's going to happen outside.
Okay, good, because I saw at the current facility, I saw a large number of different kinds of bins, and all of that
Right,
goes
all that
indoors.
stuff, I now understand what you're referring to. No, that all gets moved inside.
Very good, thank
That
you.
stops.
Thank you.
Any more questions from the commissioners? Okay. And it doesn't appear that we have any public comments. I think if that's it, if we have.
I have one more comment. We do process 10 million pounds a year, so we are a big part of what goes on in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We have no speaker cards. Can we have the staff follow up with some comments?
Thank you, Chair. So again, in terms of just this outdoor storage, staff was unaware of it, just given the submitted materials that indicated that there was no contemplated exterior alterations to the building or to the site. Even if the containers would be transient in nature, we would still ask that they would appear on the site plan. And the site plan did not indicate any location for storage containers, either permanent or transient in nature. So based upon all of the submitted materials and other written and verbal communications with the applicant, it was never contemplated by staff that there would be any type of outdoor storage, whether temporary or permanent. So that was the nature behind creating this particular condition.
Do you have any questions of staff?
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Can the storage facility or storage bins be, as a temporary use, be under administrative permit, like a temporary use permit, and not a condition as opposed to this staff report?
Yeah, not in this particular case, given the nature of the use. Temporary use permit is more for different type of activities and everything else. This is more in terms of an operational standard that is key to the actual operation of the facility itself. So we would be looking for it to be incorporated into the actual plans and the submitted materials to staff.
Thank you for the clarification.
Are there any other questions, Commissioner?
So our opposition to these storage containers is because we haven't had a chance to review them at this point, and that you need further time to review that? Because staff's recommending against us approving that section of it, correct?
Correct. So staff does not support altering the condition as written because staff has not had a chance to review any potential impacts that an installation of these particular containers would have on the actual site. Usually whenever staff does receive an application, we ask for the totality of what's being proposed to be indicated on there so that we can accurately conduct an analysis.
And this isn't something you feel like you can be comfortable saying yes to on the fly, is what you're saying?
That is correct, because there's multiple different aspects to the actual code that could impact the potential location of the sites, also parking analysis and other site conditions.
And the reason I'm asking is because obviously if we approve this as written, he can't go into business anyway. So,
if I can add to that, and part of staff's reasoning with that is this item was noticed as all the operations being inside. This particular operation is exterior to that building, which is not how it was noticed to the public. Additionally, there are screening requirements that would have to be evaluated. This is not something that we would want visible from the public right away. They haven't given us a site plan where we can evaluate that, and we haven't had an opportunity to come up with some type of condition to help them screen that in some particular way.
Exactly. And the reason I'm asking this is because, like I said, if we approve this as written, we're not doing him any favors. I'm not sure at this point if it makes sense to have a vote on this, because if we say yes, we're saying yes to something he can't use.
And I believe the applicant's representative noted that they were willing to work with staff after this.
So then we can approve it, and then you guys can hash that out afterwards, and everybody's comfortable with that. Okay, I just don't want to waste your time.
You do have a 5-minute rebuttal. Could you come up and just say that for the record, that if we approve it, you're willing to work with staff to make it workable? Okay, thank you.
If I may, Chair, just hearing the comments from the commissioners and obviously the applicant's request and comments, maybe we could clarify the condition 10, which is in the last attachment on page 9 of 12 of that attachment. And this is the condition 10 is the one that we've been referring to. And it doesn't look like it's opening for you.
No, I've lost it. Let's see.
So if you,
Let me go
let me
out.
help you there. Yep. Nope.
Oh. Okay. Hold on, technical difficulties.
Mr. Cohen, do you have the condition?
Yes.
Mr. Newman?
I'm sorry, I'm having computer.
Okay. I'm going to show,
Okay.
Yeah. So we,
so I have mine up. So one of the suggestions, Mr. Newman and commissioners, would be to modify the condition number 10. And if you look at the condition, there's a last section that reads, unless otherwise approved by the community development director or department, it reads. I would suggest we modify it to, so you have the condition which would read, no outside open storage of any kind shall be permitted on the site, including recycled materials, packaged materials, or materials with containers. There shall be no outside containers for the purposes of storing items, such as cargo containers, unless otherwise approved through an evaluation process set by the Community Development Department Director, including any necessary notices and documents deemed required by the Director. So that would be the condition. Yes, Mr.
Mr.
Newman.
Here, if I may, and Madam Chair. The distinction then is that storage would be, outside storage would be prohibited, but outside containers would be permitted.
Correct. Just hearing the testimony from the applicant. But I can't hear my mic.
Yep, I'm not sure this is on either.
Can you hear mine? You want to use mine?
It's, oh, here we go. Okay. Crazy night. Okay. I think listening to the applicant's testimony about the process and hearing your comments, I'm thinking of a way that the difficulty staff has tonight, frankly, at this time is what the mechanism would be to ensure that we're evaluating this use properly, right?
Yes.
I heard the testimony. I'm not questioning the testimony from the applicant. What I'm concerned about is that we just don't have a open kind of error of what the director's requirements are going to be for you as commissioners to understand what he would have to do to evaluate this. And it might, I'm not saying it will, but it might include some type of minor modification, which might require notice. I'm not saying it would tonight, but what I'm saying is that we want to make sure that we're clear about the director would have that ability to do those things if required, what he deems necessary to evaluate these two containers that come in that are unloaded each time they come in and then removed with new containers coming in at a certain time period.
Thank you. Are there any comments?
And Madam Chair, you would need to make sure the applicant is okay with that condition, and I will be happy to try to reread it again.
Would you please reread it? Thank you.
All right. I'm sorry because we have two different things happening here, but so condition number 10 would be outside storage as a heading. The condition would be no outside open storage of any kind shall be permitted on the site, including recycled materials, packaged materials, or materials within containers. There shall be no outside containers for the purposes of storing items, such as cargo containers, unless otherwise approved through an evaluation process set by the Community Development Department Director, including any necessary notices and documents deemed required by the Director.
Would that be acceptable? Okay.
Facilities and storage, and our ability to try to screen and hide them, we won't need that.
Okay, thank you. At this point, I'm looking for discussion or a motion.
Mr. Heer, just to clarify, this condition does not require them to come back to Planning Commission with the site plan design review.
Right, so that goes back to the hesitation, and again, part of it is looking at the worst case scenario, but when you have any type of, for example, if you have to have a minor mod, and again, I'm going to be clear, I'm not saying there's going to be one for this case, but if you had to have one, that could be an administrative hearing that could result in someone hearing it, appeal, that would come to Planning Commission. That's, I won't say far-fetched, but I'm just saying that would be a possibility. Okay. But again, the goal would be to have the director make a decision on this matter with the information provided. Right. Again, requiring additional documentation, of course, making sure that we are doing our job as planners to ensure that these things are being evaluated. Agreed. And I don't think the condition as set is a little bit too broad there. Yes. Again, I understand the need for speed, but we also have a tough situation here tonight.
Thank you.
Commissioner Newman?
2 points. One is just administrivia. My iPad, or this iPad, is cut out. Oh. So for purposes of taking votes or whatever else we do, we may need to go to the voice vote route. And then,
really quick, Madam Chair, I want to make sure we're clear with the applicant of what the condition is going to be, if they're going to accept the condition as I read it. If that's what you want, the commissioners need to decide if you want the condition as currently written, number 10, or as I just reread with the changes I put in. And then you have to make sure that the applicant's clear on that condition and agrees to that condition.
It is my understanding that the applicant agreed with your changes. So I guess I'd like to hear from the rest of the commission if they're agreeable to those changes.
The second administrative question I have is, what part of the hearing are we in? Are we still in the public hearing, or have we closed?
We have not closed the hearing. That's why I left it open. I haven't. Right. Okay. We haven't closed it. That's why.
Have not closed it.
Correct.
Right. The applicant is still on deck.
Okay. So with all this technical confusion, I did not close.
Right, and the reason why it was okay not to close is because I want to make sure we have clarity with the condition before you do close it, because if you don't, then you have to reopen it.
So in terms of the substance, Mr. Heer has proposed alternative wording to condition 10, and my understanding is that the applicant has agreed with that alternative wording. Is that
incorrect? You will shut us down. You've closed our business.
The alternative wording
I don't understand how that closes your business.
I'm not sure that's true. The alternative wording.
I need those containers to operate my business, and so
understood.
if I'm waiting, as I understood this, and I can't use them in the interim, it's essentially shut us down.
My reading of this, and I'd like Mr. Heer to weigh in here, but my understanding was that the change that he made permitted permitted containers. It made a distinction between containers and storage, as you've made, and permitted containers to be outdoors.
Then I apologize. I somehow misunderstood this.
But let's check back with Mr. Heer and be clear, because it's an important distinction here.
What I think the applicants also say, the urgency, and any delay in this process is just going to be terrible for them.
We're not going to make a decision, Mr. Sellers, on something we heard about 5 minutes ago without being very clear of what the terms are. So let's be clear on what those terms are. Mr. Heer.
Thank you. Okay, so, sir, the condition is that it is prohibited unless the community development director does the review and approves it. So you are correct. It is not approved. It is prohibited unless, but that's the condition that we had too, unless it's approved by the community development director, which is my understanding is what you need to have done now is what you're asking to do, is to have that community development director review this new change and then make a determination if that's going to be okay. And that's what we're doing. We're not going to bring it back to Planning Commission unless it went through some other process. Again, I have to caution everybody that I can't assume that this change is going to be, someone's not going to be upset about it and want to have a hearing on it. I don't think that would happen, but I can't assume that. So got to make sure that the director has an ability to make decisions through a process that he deems is appropriate for that review. So that's why I'm changing the condition just slightly to ensure that he's comfortable with the review process that he needs to have done.
Mr. Here, to follow up, perhaps I misunderstood when you read the suggested alternative language. Was it not correct? Did you not suggest changing the condition to allow containers to be outside?
It would be to be allowed outside if it's approved by the director.
If approved by the director, I
Correct.
see. Okay.
Chair,
Staff?
if we may be permitted, we can actually try and edit the condition number 10 live, just so everyone can see the exact text of what Mr. Here has been stating as well. So, Mr. Here, I last ended up on Community Development Department, and if you can humor me and state your proposed condition language one more time.
For number 10?
That's correct.
So it would be no outside open storage of any kind shall be permitted on the site, including recycled materials, packaged materials, or materials within containers. There shall be no outside containers for the purposes of storing items such as cargo containers unless otherwise approved through an evaluation process set by the Community Development Department Director, including any necessary notices and documents deemed required by the Director.
Mr. Sellers?
Yes.
We're kind of waiting for your thoughts, your response. Is this adapted?
Well, there's a great urgency. We would like to meet with the planning director tomorrow and try to get this resolved as quickly as possible. That's the goal here.
So,
Otherwise, the facility is shut down. That doesn't benefit anyone because they're out of business and they're out of the other site.
staff, is that possible?
We are willing to work with the applicant on that. I can't speak to the timing of the director's calendar in terms of that. In terms of your project planner is available to you, obviously, this is something that's happening on short notice. However, we're still going to need time to properly evaluate any changes that are proposed. I don't want to leave you with the impression that this is something that would necessarily be an over-the-counter process, which is why this came up this evening and there's been a discussion on that. We'll try our best to accommodate you in any way that we can. However, there are certain processes and procedures that must be followed.
Thank you. Are there any more comments? Okay. At this point, I will close the public hearing and we'll open the floor for a motion or discussion. Commissioner?
I think perhaps a little discussion among ourselves is probably warranted before anyone makes a motion. I don't want to leave the impression that I want to put Mr. Connor or anyone else at a disadvantage here. I understand the distinction between containers being outside and storage of e-waste being outside. Those are two different things. We're all clear on that. At the same time, there's this process concern where the application as brought to us, including the applicant's narrative, said all storage inside. The applicant's narrative says that as well. And that's what was advertised to the public and to this commission. And so I'm a little concerned on process grounds that we were presented with one thing and that we're approving something else on very short notice. So I think maybe if we bat around a bit how to resolve the conflict between those two things, while I have the process concern, I'm also very sympathetic to the business activity of any applicant and of this applicant in particular. I'm not averse in any way to the nature of the application before us. It's just this process issue of what to do about outdoor storage of containers when that wasn't advertised. I'd like to hear from other commissioners on that.
Yeah, I personally am unclear as to, I mean, my first question to them was, how does your process work? The first thing I want to know is, where's the stuff come from? What's it do there? And then how does it go out? And that seems to be kind of instrumental to how his business functions. So I'm not sure why how we got to the point where we're approving something that doesn't allow his business to function. And so, yeah, so I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I feel like, what are we saying yes to, except that this guy can't run his business? And I'm disappointed for him. I don't know where in the process it got lost. I'm sorry that happened, and I hope that we can resolve it quickly for him, because like everybody else, I'm thrilled with e-waste recycling. I think it's a very important element.
Yeah.
I think we all appreciate exactly, Mr. Connor, what you want to accomplish, and I think we're all in favor of the concept, obviously. I think what we're all kind of dealing with is not necessarily the substance, but the process. And again, you can say to us that you've talked to all the neighbors and gotten all of their agreement and understanding, and that may be true. The problem is, without the actual, some documentation, notice to the neighbors of the fact that there would be these outside things. And keep in mind, staff didn't understand the interpretation either, and the neighbors may not either. So it's one of those things that I think we're trying to make sure from a transparency standpoint, we can basically cross all the T's and dot the I's, that this process has been done in a way that nobody can come back and say, you railroaded this process through, without making sure everybody had notice and an opportunity to respond. With that said, again, I totally understand your frustration. Believe me, I would feel the same in terms of what you want to accomplish. And I share Commissioner Buss's mentality of, I don't want to prove something just to actually have you not be successful. That's why I kind of implied it initially as to whether or not you wanted to continue this to actually get that process completed. But it sounds like we want to move forward with this, and again, allow the director the ability to have those conversations, to then have that ability to actually then accommodate the situation if that's possible. I think that actually is the best of both worlds, and so I would support that concept.
Commissioner?
Yes, I agree with all the commissioners' consent as well. I'm supportive of Mr. Here's new condition, as he's described here. My only concern is, in order to expedite your time and your business operations, we don't want you, my feeling is not to come back to the Planning Commission for that approval. I feel that should be an administrative approval at the discretion of the Community Development Director. And I'm hoping that staff will be willing to work with you quickly to address this issue, and I'm sure they will. But as a planner by trade, you have to go through the planning process, look at parking, look at any visual appearance, effect to neighbors, and I'm sure that can be sorted during this design review process.
Commissioner?
I don't have an opinion on whether approval of the change in condition should be before the commission or administrative. I don't know as much as my fellow commissioner about the process to say. I want to agree with something Commissioner Lanson said, that a continuance is also a viable option, and maybe what we should be looking at is a decision between whether we want to vote on the application as is with the changed language of condition 10 Mr. Heer suggested, or vote for continuance.
I would like to express my opinion. I think if we vote for a continuance, there's the notice, there's all this time delay. I think we need to give this gentleman an answer. And I personally think that this is the type of business we want in our community. And I feel that we need to work with him. And I sense that the city wants to work with him as well. I don't think it would be fair to continue it because that adds so much more time. This should be handled, in my opinion, administratively.
Yeah. And we're
I'm
in
sorry.
closed. We're
The
in
meeting
closed
has
session.
been closed.
I appreciate the process issues around a continuance. That those are all good points, and I just want to emphasize that I haven't heard anyone on the commission say anything against the business activity. It sounds like we're all very much in favor of finding a way for this applicant's business to continue uninterrupted. The question is, how do we get there in a way that is code compliant and that is transparent and is consistent with what was advertised to the commission and to the public?
Commissioner Lanson, did you have something?
Yes, I just wanted to check with Mr. Hayer. Is it legal for us to abdicate our responsibility and to give it to staff? And as far as that Section 10 goes? I mean,
Yeah, so again, this is why we're wording the condition the way that we're wording it,
Okay,
is simply
so-
to ensure that, I just have to protect everybody, including commissioners, that the director's got to be reviewing this whenever he reviews it. And to be clear, a approval tonight is approving this project, this use, with the condition, and that condition is going to say that the director needs to chime
The
in on this
director
one
can figure
on
out
this
how
one
to do
issue.
it.
Everything else, he's fine with the conditions. It's just that one issue that we have to deal with. And so, my hesitation is only in the fact that I'm going to assume it's got to be. I'm predicting it's got to be a very simple process for him to review. I can't speak for it until we review it, though.
And that's kind of the thing I'm thinking.
Right,
Is,
and so
that
that was-
what if this turns out to be something
that's
more
why I'm
than
wording the
something,
condition
and then we're
the way-
giving that all to one man to make it
Correct. That's why I'm wording it because we got to make sure the process. For example, let's say it's a minor mod, it's got to be approved. It could be approved administratively, absolutely. But there's that process that can be done with that, and you never know what happens with a minor mod.
Because
That's why.
we're both in agreement that 99 times out of 100, nobody's going to care about this. But there is a possibility that people are going to start caring when they find out there's going to be storage containers outside that have various e-waste in them.
Correct.
Okay.
Is there any more discussion? Do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the project and the conditions stated herein, except for the revised condition number 10 that Mr. Here has proposed.
Are you including the revised?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe the conditions on the. Is that true, Mr. Nielsen? Good job. So that condition actually is now been printed up on the large screen. Oh, now it's in front of you.
I would ask that Mr. Ear do a quick proofread to make sure that I captured your comments correctly.
And we will pause for that.
At the very end, it should be deemed required by the director with a capital D. So it's not deemed necessary, but deemed required by the director. Nope, capital D for the director, not deemed. Yep, that would be it.
Okay.
Yes. I can restate it if you like.
Can you restate it with all the numbers?
Yes, all the numbers. I'd like to make the motion to approve special use permit 2019-70537 based on the findings and subject to the conditions contained here in the resolution.
Okay. Do we still need to do a voice vote? You're down? Okay.
If I may, could I just have you read the first recommendation as well, please?
Yes. For the CEQA? find the project to be category exempt, the provisions of CEQA under Section 15308, Class 8, actions by regulatory agencies for protection of the environment.
Thank you.
A voice vote, Commissioner Buss? Commissioner Cohan?
Yes.
Commissioner Lanson?
Yes.
Commissioner Newman?
Yes.
Chair McMahon?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay. We do have an appeal opportunity. Any aggrieved party who wishes to appeal the Planning Commission's decision may do so by filing an appeal with the Community Development Department within 10 days. Okay. I guess we move on to department reports. 8A, we evidently do not have any.
That is correct.
9, commission comments and AB 1234 reports. No? Okay. Staff update. 10A, follow-up items, announcements, upcoming issues.
No announcements, just that we have our next regularly scheduled meeting on August 26th. It will be a full agenda, and we're looking forward to having that after the commission's break.
Okay. Is this still a casual meeting? The question has been asked.
We will be formal by then.
Formal by then, all right. It's in the minutes now. Formal by then. All right. Thank you all. The meeting is now adjourned to the next meeting, August 26, 2019 at 6 p.m.